Hello there, folks. Welcome, welcome. The Ready to Race community featuring the one and only yours truly, the man you're listening to right this moment, Bumblebee, once again. Good comment there from Gaming Type. Good morning, commentary dude. Good morning to you as well there. Glad to have 5 viewers already before the fun begins. That's RTR Sanda heading out. Amateur racer number 28, if I read that correctly. Perlin 117 behind that chrome green and gray colored, silver colored better yet, McLaren, getting passed by those two Ferraris there. The racers to beat, better yet. RTR Tyke in the Lamborghini coming out on his outlap as well, followed by a fellow Lamborghini driver, RTR Lucas 22. Introducing Marco Boldi, a new driver joining us here today, an amateur racer if I am not mistaken, racing in the Honda NSX, also known as the Acura NSX, depending on which game you play. And the beloved Citroen of Vornax, followed by another Ferrari of RTR Loves Hell. Fairly new racer. I believe he joined us last installment of the GR4 Championship at the Le Mans track. RTR ID 78. Another Citroen driver. As you can see, some of the racers at the top not exactly happy with their settings, going back into the pits. They'll be doing another outlap. I'm sure they have time to kill though, although they still have about 28 minutes left in the qualifying session as it has just begun. And a beautiful livery there, brand new one from RTR Mad Max, coming out in that black and yellow. Not sure if he knows too much about NFL, but I wonder if he's a Steelers fan. I'll ask him after the race. Mad John joining us once again in the Aston Martin, the green Red Bull sponsored Aston Martin. Well, maybe one day it will actually be sponsored by Red Bull, but for now it is just a very nice livery to drive around in for the moment. Another McLaren driver with a highlighter green DC sponsored Dopey NLB coming back to race again. And the driver that I always struggle to pronounce, Mikeske? I think it's Mikeske. I think that's what they told me last time in the comments. Mr. V-Town 84 is going to be in the pits for now. He's going to be coming out later on, I believe. So far he has mediums slapped on that BMW, but I think he will be coming out later on, maybe changing that before he heads out for his outlap and later on his flying lap. Going over the points as these drivers are heading into turn number 1, RTR Perlin 117, followed by his partner RTR Atron Senna. Tyke coming out pretty smoothly, followed by Lucas 22. Sandan and McLaren right behind him. Was the NSX of the brand new driver Marco Boldi. Welcome to the team, Mr. Marco Boldi. Vornax, RTR Loves Hell, the Ferrari and the Citroen coming out smoothly as well. Mad John on another part of the track there, followed by Dopey NLB. I think he's around turn number 6, 7 if I'm correct. I'll correct myself later on, but we'll quickly go over the points there. At least the top 3 racers to beat is going to be Mr. RTR Atron Senna with 119 points in first place, dominating for now. RTR Perlin 117 in close contention of P1 still in the championship with 105 points. RTR Tyke in P3 right now with 89 points. Still has a chance, I believe, to get into P2, I leave out of the championship. And just out of the points for podium position would be Vornax with 65 points, RTR Mad Max with 60, and possibly RTR Lucas 22 with 55. RTR ID 78 with 52 points. It's going to be another racer, and he did join quite late, so he is not exactly in contention for championship winnings, but he is a good driver nonetheless. RTR Loves Hell is going to have 29 points at the bottom of the podium for now. Mike's, I believe, his points have still not yet been added. They still have to be transferred over as he was on the secondary league. Don't worry, Mike's, we will add you to the points before the championship is done. Speaking of championship, this is kind of going to be an extra exciting race, and here's exactly why, folks. So there was some serious talks within the league, and just to make sure that we give you the purest possible production of racing here with the Gran Turismo system and what it has to offer, this is actually going to be the last race of the GR4 championship. So technically this is the final one. This is the one for all the marbles, for all the points. Whoever finishes on the points here is going to be the man to beat. So later on, possibly in the next live stream, is when we're going to surprise you with the new league that we have designed and brought up for you. Also going to be a very much exciting league. Hopefully we'll bring even closer racing than you have seen in this league, which was definitely more the main part of the conversations that we had. So hopefully it's going to be more exciting for myself, for Bumblebee to be commentating about, and hopefully more exciting for viewers alike. So far, most of the racers, I believe, if not all of them, coming out pretty smoothly from turns number 1 and 2. Those are going to be the main ones, especially tricky ones. Number 1, of course, being because you're coming off straight from that long straight past the finish line. You're going to have to gear down to about geared first, second gear, depending on which vehicle you are driving. As well as that second hairpin of a turn that you're going to have to be going through in turn number 2. Also going to be another tight one, as RTR ID 78 so far putting down the fastest sector of the day as he goes around the Red Bull ring. So far in P2, I believe, the man to beat right now is Perlin 117, fastest lap time 127.18. 127.14 as he just quickly corrects me as he flies past the finish line. Thank you, Perlin 117. RTR ID 78 coming around for his second or third try, I believe. Fifth try. Well, fourth try if you take away the outlap. May have been another outlap in there as well as I'm looking at the times. He's still going to be holding on to second place. His fastest lap time was back in lap 3 still. It was a 127.38. RTR Tyke responding still with that Halloween livery. Driving around there with the scarecrow at the front of that Lamborghini. He's going to be in P3 right now. He just put down his fastest lap time for him personally with a 127.59. Keeping him up there in P3. But we're still pretty fresh into this qualifying session, so still yet to see some more racers that we are expecting to see a little bit higher on the leaderboard. As time goes by, RTR Lucas 22 driving past him, watching him in P5 right now. His fastest lap time was just earlier before we decided to look at him, a 128.08, just out of the 127 club. Vornax is going to be in P4, the last of the 127s in terms of time. Watching RTR Tyke as he slows down for a penalty. Great sportsmanship by RTR Tyke, one of our best racers of the league here. Not exactly going to be a good flying lap for him now because of that penalty. However, the rules are the rules, and we do like to play by them here at the RTR racing community. Vornax certainly impressing today, holding on to P2 so far. Fastest lap time is going to be a 1:27.23. Adrian Senna, RTR Adrian Senna going a little bit too tight there of the curbs there as he started climbing up around turn 2. Del Piano be one of the last at the moment to enter turn number 2. He begins to climb in that McLaren pretty smoothly around the apex. Around he goes. Currently he's going to be in P12. Fastest lap time at 1:32.41. And Mike Skid, Mr. V-Town 84, currently in P13. Fastest lap 1:32.99. Although he's only put down 3 laps so far in that BMW, representing the only BMW in the lineup today. RTR Lucas 22 getting another flying lap. A few racers, Vornax, ID78, RTR Tyke, and RTR Loves Hell going into the pits for a few changes, I believe. RTR Adrian Senna making a climb into turn number 2 as well. Turn number 3, better yet. Turn number 2 is considered that little kink they just passed, that slight turn you see as they go up the hill. Del Piano B in the McLaren yet again. Watching the man to beat as he puts down the fastest sectors so far. Coming around turn number 8, flying down there towards turn number 9. And that final turn, passing the entrance of the pits. Almost going a little bit too wide there as he goes past turn number 10, down the main finish line straight. Does he improve on his fastest lap time? He certainly does. 1:26.91 is going to be the time to beat now. Watching him closely entering turn number 1, making sure if these racers do get a penalty, they are quick to burn it off before they enter turn number 3 especially. And they have been also instructed to turn on over to the right hand side, just to make sure if there are racers behind them, they do not get in the way, of course. RTR Lucas 22 going very wide there in turn number 3. Back out on the track though. May not matter for him too much, as you can see he is currently on an outlap, so not exactly too worried about his race line that much, although he certainly doesn't want to get a penalty either or. Mad John coming around turn number 1 as well in the Aston Martin. I think he's also the only Aston Martin out there, part of the Pro-Am team, if I'm not mistaken. Mike's still in P13, fastest lap time now with a 1:31.59, improving earlier on that 1:32.99 that he had before posted up for himself. RTR Sanda going into the pits. Perlin 117. Still at the top of the food chain. RTR Adrian Sanda, the championship leader, in P4 at the moment. Not performing too well yet in this qualifying session. Halfway through it, I believe, just over 15 minutes left to go. One of our new racers, RTR Marco Boldi, climbing up turn number 3. One of the amateur racers. Racer number 64 in the Honda NSX as he heads towards turn number 4. making the climb now as well. The only BMW out there is a sweet Hoonigan Red Bull livery on that BMW Mikeske V-Town 84. Pearland 117 coming around for yet again another flying lap. Smoothly around turn number 1, as well as RTR Adrian Senna flashing his lights, showing off for the live stream, as he always knows somehow when he's on the camera. Some drivers already racing in this qualifying session, as you can check out the quick scrap here between RTR Lucas 22 and Vornax. Lamborghini versus Citroen climbing up turn number 3, chasing each other down towards turn number 4. Lucas 22, I think, submitting to the Citroen, as he knows right now it's really not about passing the other drivers on the track, it's about passing the other drivers on the timesheets. Glad to see not many of our drivers today are getting penalties around the Red Bull Ring. As we all know, Gran Turismo Sport here is not exactly known for having a good penalty system, although it will make do for entertainment and live stream purposes. With that being said though, it's very nice to see that most of the drivers are still driving pretty smoothly around the track. Watching Vornax deciding to go into the pits there. There's some brand new tires. Same thing can be said for RTR Adrian Senna getting brand new tires as well. Pearland 117 coming up for one more flying lap. RTR ID 78 making the climb along with RTR Tyke there. Loves Hell chasing RTR Lucas 22. Once again decides to go wide, giving some space to the other drivers, although he was on a flying lap. This is certainly now ruined, as he went extremely wide, lost tons of time there. Wonder what his plans were. Maybe he just wanted to get out of the traffic there, as it does seem pretty congested there around turns number 4 and 3. Some drivers making the climb now as well. Dopey NLB. See if we can quickly find him. RTR and Mad Max. Oh, there he is. And the BMW of Mikeske V-Town 84. With those drivers making that climb up around turn number 3. Watching the rest of the traffic pack heading down turns number 8 and 9. RTR Adrian Senna on an outlap. RTR ID 78 going very late into the pits. Maybe practicing his trickery for the race, who knows. Vornax on an outlap, currently in P3. I think that's the highest I've seen the Citroens here in a while. A lot of these drivers are certainly excited for the final race of this league, of the GR4 Championship. That's why we're seeing the best driving out of all the racers here. Vornax included right now in P3, in a podium position to start off the race. Representing the Citroens, RTR ID 78 closely behind him. As the Citroen team is actually pretty good at playing teammates throughout the whole championship. If you decide to rewatch any of those live streams, you will see how much teamwork they do throughout the races. Pretty impressive to see. RTR Tyke in one of the Lamborghinis. And the last of the Citroens, the black and yellow, at the lowest of the Citroens. On the lineup here so far in P6 at the moment. 10 minutes left in the qualifying session. RTR Mad Max. RTR Loves Hell. The third of the Ferraris in P7 at the moment. Lowest on the timesheets right now also for the Lamborghinis. RTR Lucas 22 and P8 Marco Bodi doing pretty good for himself, now moving himself up to P6 as we turn the camera over to him. Last lap that he just put down a 127.47 in the Honda NSX. Maybe deserves a little bit more than an amateur sticker on the side of that car. We'll see later on. RTR Mad Max responding as best he can in P7 now with a 127.47 as he just came around the finish line, going a little bit wide there into turn number 1. Getting away with no penalty though, lucky him. RTR loves hell. Climbing up around turn number 3, followed by RTR Lucas 22 and Vornax just behind him, still in P3. RTR Adrian Senna taking away P1 position from his partner Ferrari, Perlin 117. He is now the man to beat. Fastest lap time, 127.85, is going to be put down there by none other than RTR Adrian Senna, as RTR Senna decides to mow the lawn just like Valtteri Bottas did earlier this year in the McLaren, but he's doing it, or sorry, in the Mercedes, but he's doing it in the McLaren. RTR Senna not having a good day for that flying lap, sliding out, drifting, almost rally crossing around turns number 6 and 7. Hopefully next time around, RTR Senna manages to get a better lap time around the Red Bull ring for him today. Coming around turns number 3, once again with no penalties. Great to see clean racing from the RTR racing community, as usual. That's Lucas 22 driving a little bit slow there around in between turns number 3 and 4. Wondering if he was maybe fixing something around his sim rig setup. RTR Senna right now in P10. Going a little wide there on turns number 3 again. Chasing his potential down into turn number 4. Fellow McLaren driver just ahead of him, Dopey NOB, who happens to be just behind him going on the leaderboard, is now physically behind him on the track as well, as he went very wide heading out of turn number 4. Now chasing down his fellow McLaren partner in turns number 7 and 8. Perlin 117 responding to RTR Adrian Senna. Time to beat now 126.565. It's definitely going to be coming down to the tenths and the thousandths in between these racers. Vornax, top of the Citroens right now, number 53, still in P3 right now, podium position. RTR Tyke in the Lamborghini, highest of the Lamborghinis as well, in P4 right now. Chasing down the man that is right behind him on the leaderboard, RTR ID 78 in the Citroen. It's about a second of a difference, or sorry, a few tenths of a second of difference in their qualifying lap times. So they're certainly battling it out on the track and on the timesheets as well. RTR Adrian Senna soon to answer, or at least try and challenge RTR Perlin 117, as he's going yet again for another outlap, probably getting ready to do a few more flying laps on fresher tires. Still watching this quick scrap here between RTR Tyke and RTR ID 78 Lamborghini versus Citroen as they come around the finish line straight. Let's see if they improve on their own lap times. I think RTR Tyke just got a personal best. Still in P4 on the leaderboard. RTR ID 78 still right behind him on the leaderboard, but ahead of him on the track, so he may be able to slow down his competition Maybe throwing him off his line, doing some late braking or some early braking. Hopefully not too early though. We do not condone any sort of brake checking. At least not on purpose. RTR Marco Bodi, new addition to the GR4 Championship, joining us for the last race of the championship, drifting a little bit around there, around turn number 4. Showing off pretty well for himself for the first race of the league here for himself. Earlier in P6, now in P8, Paralin 117, still in P1 right now. RTR Mad Max responding to all of the leaders at the top in that Citroen. He is now going to be the top of the Citroens in P2. Fastest lap time at 126.59. He's going to have a great starting position so far with 4 minutes left in this qualifying race session. RTR Adrian Senna going yet again in the pits one more time. RTR ID 78 in P4 now, surpassing RTR Tyke. ID 78's fastest lap time was his last lap. Lap 17 for him, 126.936. Citroen's doing pretty good for themselves in this final race of the championship. Pretty high up on the leaderboard. RTR Mad Max, top of the Citroens. And now in P2, RTR Adrian Senna down to P3. Last of the podium positions. RTR ID 78, second of the Citroens. He's going to be in P4, and the third of the gang is going to be just behind him in P5 now. RTR Tyke, that Lamborghini, getting bumped down to P6, letting his Lamborghini partner in P9, RTR Lucas 22, pass him around turns number 4. Loves Hell in P7 still. Marco Bodi still in P8. RTR Sanda still not improving on himself in P10 there. His fellow McLaren driver Dopey NLB just behind him, still in P11 as well. Mad John in P12, and Mike Skid, Mr. V-Town 84 in the BMW, back in the pits in P13. Once again, seeing a lot of traffic heading down into turn number 4 there, as we were watching second place runner right now. That was RTR Mad Max, now seeing his fellow Citroen driver Vornax now in P3, bumping RTR Adrian Senna, championship leader, down to P4. Paralin 117, top of the Ferrari, still in P1 with just over a minute and 30 seconds left in this qualifying race session. Probably will be yet again another little bit of overflow time, so some drivers that are out there, as Paralin 117 once again improves on his own fastest lap time. Fastest lap time to beat now, 126.461, shaving a few tenths here and there around the Red Bull ring for himself. Still in P1, on challenge at the moment. RTR Mad Max, the closest behind him in the Citroen right now, with a 126.595 back in lap number 16 for this racer. RTR Tyke going just a little bit wide there behind him, trying to use the draft of that P13 racer. RTR Adrian Senna responding to positions 2 and 3. Getting himself back up there as there's a yellow flag on the track. Getting himself back up there to P1. Fastest lap time to beat now, 126.26. I think that's going to be around 2 tenths faster than RTR Paralin 117's 126.46. RTR Mad Max still in P13, sorry, still in P3 now. Still in a podium position to start the race off in the Citroen. RTR Tyke trying to use him as a drafting partner still as they fly around turn number 4. Tyke going a little bit wide there still. Vornax is the reason for that yellow flag, although he is well out of the way there. Almost looks like he's just doing a photo shoot there. Pretty nice position to have the Citroen there. I'd take a nice photo if I were you. RTR ID 78 coming around for what may be his final lap. Improving just a little bit in P5 there now. That's going to be a 3-4-5 lockout for the Citroens. Although there still is 2 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. Not sure if some drivers are still out on flying laps. Seems that some drivers may be, not exactly sure though. RTR Sanda is certainly still putting down the pedal as far as he can. Best personal sector for him there in that McLaren, trying to improve on that P10 position just before the time runs out. Down he goes towards turn number 9. Drifting a little bit out of the exit of that turn. Slightly downhill and a little bit wide there once again in turn number 10, heading down towards the finish line straight. Is he going to be able to improve? No, he will not, unfortunately for him. He's going to stay in P10. And right now, unofficial results, but it's going to be RTR Adrian Senna on pole position right now for the final race of the GR4 Championship. His fellow Ferrari partner in P2, Perlin 117, and the Citroen's best performance for the Citroens of the Championship League. RTR Mad Max with a P3 podium position to start off the race, followed by his fellow Citroen drivers Vornax in P4, RTR ID 78 in P5. Mr. RTR Tyke, top of the Lamborghinis in a Halloween livery of that specific vehicle for him in P6. Lucas 22 just behind him, the other Lamborghini in P7. RTR Loves Hell, the last of the Ferraris in P8. Marco Bodi, our new driver, doing pretty good for himself so far. Amateur driver in P9. RTR Sanda couldn't improve, although he tried his best on that final lap. He's going to stay in P10. His fellow McLaren partner in P11, just behind him, Dopey NLB. Mad John, the only Aston Martin out there in P12. And Mike Skip V-Town 84, still in P13 with the BMW. We're just going to be waiting for the timer to go down. 24 seconds remaining. No more flying laps to be seen. These drivers just going to be cruising around, waiting for the time to go, waiting for the race to begin. And with just a little bit more time before the race begins, as you can see the screen change pretty shortly. If you're interested in joining us, racing with us, or assisting us in the production side, check us out or DM us, message us on Facebook, RTR Ready to Race Community, or Instagram at RTR_Ready to Race. And also coming soon for you on Instagram, Bumblebee_Broadcasting. And those will be the official results. RTR Adrian Senna in P1, Perlin 117 in P2 and P3 for the Citroens. I'm going to be looking closely at the Citroens, see how they do as this race goes on. This is going to be a 1 hour and 30-minute race. RTR Adrian Senna getting a pretty good start. Not really being contested down into turns number 1. Perlin 117 still in P2. The Citroen already getting challenged by a great start there, as always, from RTR Type with that Lamborghini. Great traction always off the start. Vornax is now going to be top of the Citroen, challenging his fellow Citroen partner, now 3 wide with the Lamborghini. The Citroen going up into turn number 3, up the climb there. Lucas 22 wanting a piece of the action as well. Getting on the inside there. An amazing overtake there from Lucas 22 from way back, sneaking up the climb there in P3. Now challenging his fellow Lamborghini partner as they go 3 wide again into P4, into turn number 4. And RTR ID 78 coming out victorious so far in that Citroen in P3, chasing each other down now around turns number 5 and 6. RTR H and Senna and Parallel 117 getting away pretty well. Lucas 22 taking away podium position P3 once again from that Citroen. RTR ID 78 not giving it up that easily though, as they start chasing each other down very closely. Downs into turn number 9 and 10. Lucas 22 down in a P4 once again. Loves Hell flying up there from, what was it, around P8, P9 I believe, coming up to P5. RTR Tyke flying, dropping down to P6. Mad Max not exactly having a very good start. Same thing can be said for Vornax, who started in P3 and Vornax started in P5. They're now in P7 and P7 and P8. RTR Sanda improving a little bit in that McLaren. In P9, Dopey NLB, same thing can be said for him. Marco Bodi, new driver, dropping down to P12 at the moment. Mike Skiv, V-Town 84, still in P13. Mad John improving slightly, passing the rookie driver in P11 now. Moving back up the lineup as RTR Sanda tries to go a little bit wide, loses it there, and going up turn number 3, dropping back down there to P9. Dopey NLB picking up the scraps of his fellow McLaren driver. Vornax still in P7, Lupsell now in P6. RTR Trike improving slightly on his position, down up there now in P5. Lucas 22 still down there in P4 after his great start and his great battle against the Lamborghinis and the Citroens. Into turns number 3 and 4, going 3 wide on both occasions on the first lap. That was some racing to see indeed. These drivers were definitely hyped up for the Red Bull Ring race, the last race of the GR4 Championship. So this one is going to be the grand finale for you folks. Just over a minute and 26 seconds left in this race, 4 minutes into it so far. RTR H and Senna getting a little bit out of shape there, going into the grass. Parallel 117 taking P1 away from him. RTR ID 78 taking advantage at the fact that RTR H and Senna slowed down, chasing him up the hill, getting the inside of turn number 3, acing the apex though, getting a switcheroo there from RTR H and Senna, as he's now challenging on the inside in terms of positioning for the next turn, turn number 4. Though ID 78 still just slightly ahead of him. No, he is not after all. RTR ID 78 giving up that P2 position to the Ferrari of RTR Adrian Senna yet again. RTR Tyke coming back up to the P4 to challenge the Citroen of ID 78 soon. Just a few tenths separating them. 7 tenths separating RTR Tyke and ID 78. I was looking at the time separating RTR Adrian Senna and ID 78, as he is now under attack from the Citroen once again. Less than a tenth, less than 2 tenths separating them now as they go down the straight, beginning laps number 4. RTR Parallel 117 still in P1. ID 78 still managing to hold on to P3, beginning lap number 4. RTR Tyke getting chased by his Lamborghini partner Lucas 22. He took a peek on the inside before they get into turns number 3. Loves Hell took a peek pretty late and paid the price for it, going a little bit too tightly over that curb of turn number 3, bumping and grinding over it. Still holding on to P6 though at the moment. Vornax trying to chase that pack. Dopey NLB dealing with the new driver Marco Bodi closely behind him as he starts chasing him down turns number 5 and 6. See if Marco Bodi can get an overtake soon on this McLaren in P8. Sorry, those were turns 6 and 7. Now they're going to be chasing each other down into turns number 9 and 10. Perlin 117 may have been burning off a penalty that we didn't see there, as he went over to the right hand side and slowed down, giving a chance for RTR Adrian Senna and RTR ID 78 to get back up to the P2, as he is taking full advantage of it, as he has the inside of turn number 3, bumping a little bit against the Ferrari there of Perlin 117, although Perlin 117 still comes out victorious, losing a little bit of speed though, both drivers, because of that bumping, and RTR Tyke is certainly smelling opportunity into turn number 4. Not close enough to make any sort of attack just yet, but closing in behind them nonetheless. Down around the curves of turn number 6 and 7 they go. Back down to Marco Bodi, as he did get the overtake earlier on Dopiano B. Congratulations to him there. And Vornax also challenging the last Ferrari down in the lineup for P6. That's Vornax against RTR Loves Hell. Down into turns number 9 and 10. Going very wide, Loves Hell into turn number 10. Keeping it under control before they enter and exit, although he does get a penalty. And he does do the right thing. He does burn it off. And Vornax is now in a P6. Taking advantage of that turn of events. Marco Bodi also taking advantage now, challenging that Ferrari in the Honda NSX as they enter turns number 1. Both with a little bit of oversteer. Exiting that turn. Back up the line, RTR ID 78. And now keeping a close eye on his rearview mirrors, as he has that bright orange Lamborghini of RTR Tyke behind him. RTR Adrian Senna with a pretty good lead, now ahead of his Ferrari partner, full second ahead of him at the moment. RTR Perlin 117 still in P2, getting chased down about half a second in between himself and P3 contender RTR ID 78. Mr. RTR Tyke in P4 in the Lamborghini just behind him as well, about half a second separating those two drivers as they come down the finish line straight to begin lap number 7. Lucas 22, the second Lamborghini driver in P5. Vornax chasing him down though, slowly but surely in P6. Loves Hell losing one position because of that earlier penalty, exiting turn number 10. Marco Bodi still in P8. And Mad Max with a great qualifying session, although not exactly a great start to this race. He's going to be in P9 at the moment in that Citroen, the lowest of the Citroens I believe at the moment. Hopefully that changes up after all the changes and tricks of the first pit stop of the race. Dopiano B in P10, RTR Sanda second of the McLaren in P11, still Mad John in P12, and it seems that Mikeske V-Town 84 is no longer with us. There's no P13 anymore. Unfortunately, he is not going to be in this race. So right now it's going to be Mad John at the back of the pack now in P12 in the Aston Martin. RTR Tyke getting the overtake while we were going down the line there on RTR ID 78. As they head down the finish line straight once more. RTR Tyke getting a little bit out of shape as they start going into turns number 1. That might slow him down a little bit and give him a chance. Give a chance for RTR ID 78 just behind him to start closing that gap that he lost as he got overtaken earlier in the laps before. They go around the highest point of this track is just after turn number 3. There's that part that they just drove over. RTR Lucas 22 still in P5, Vornak still in P6. Staying with the leaders for just a little bit, RTR Tyke in P2 for just a little bit, as Perlin 117 got a little bit out of shape as he exited turn number 4. That created an opportunity for P4 contender right now, runner-up ID 78, as that slowed down those 2 drivers ahead of him, and that closed down the gap for him. So bad news for the drivers ahead, good news for the driver behind. That is the beauty of racing. RTR Lucas 22, the next driver after those first 4 drivers ahead, not losing one another at the top of the pack up there. Vornak still chasing down Lucas 22, pretty far back from Lucas 22 a few laps before. Now just about a second and a few tenths away from him as he does the climb up around turn number 3. RTR Loves Hell still in P7 in the Ferrari. Marco Bodi still holding on to P8 as RTR Mad Max starts to creep up behind him, as you can see him in the background of his camera shot. The 2 McLarens, Dopey NOB and RTR Sanda, still in P10 and 11. It seems that Mad John in the Aston Martin has also left us. So back of the pack now is going to be RTR Sanda in P11. And back to the top 4 racers. Front of the pack here, RTR Adrian Senna, RTR Perlin 117, Tyke and ID 78, all closely behind each other as they start chasing each other down into turn number 10. Great exit for RTR Adrian Senna and Perlin 117 as well. Maybe seeing an attack in the next few laps to come from ID 78. So he's starting to get closely behind there. Less than half a second in between himself and that Lamborghini of RTR Tyke. Up around turn number 3. Perlin 117 now giving RTR Adrian Senna a bit of a bumper kiss just before the enters turns number 6 and 7. RTR Tyke also closely behind the Ferrari ahead of him, peeking on the inside. Wonder what he was looking for. That is certainly not a place for an overtake. But he tried to peek nonetheless. RTR Tyke trying any trick in the book he can to get ahead of that Ferrari just ahead of him, Perlin 117. ID 78. The lowest of the Citroens on qualifying, but now he is highest on the track in the race where it matters. RTR Adrian Senna just almost losing it on the exit of turn number 1. As they climb up that short little offset turn of turn number 2. Now almost going 3 wide at the top of the hill there of turn number 3. RTR Tyke biting a little bit of the curb there. Still managing to stay tightly behind Perlin 117 in P2. ID 78 not getting the best exit on turn number 3, but making up for it on the straight. He's closely behind them once again. And just behind him, RTR Lucas 22 is closely catching up to them as well, and he's bringing the Citroen of Vornax and P6 along with him. So let's see what they bring to the mix if they do happen to catch up to the first 4 leaders of this race. RTR loves hell, last of the Ferraris, just behind those drivers. He's going to be about 4 seconds away from P6 Vornax and RTR Lucas 22. RTR Mad Max bottom of the Citroens in P8 still. Marco Bodi, the rookie, still in P9, and the back of the McLarens, and the McLarens still in the back of the pack there. Rounding up the back of the leaderboard, RTR H and Senna drifting slightly around turns number 1, wondering if tire wear is now going to be a factor well into this race. 12 laps into this race now. RTR ID78 trying to get on the inside of turn number 3, just out of contention to make a move there, and that is going to be feeding him into the grasps of RTR Lucas 22 and Vornax in P5 and P6. So ID78 is going to be in a bit of a tight position there, now trying to make up for a position and making sure he doesn't lose any to the drivers behind him, who certainly want a piece of the action ahead. ID78 doing everything he can to maintain a decent line and make that car as wide as possible. Around turns number 7, 8, chasing each other down into turns number 9. Lucas 22 getting dangerously close to that rear wing of that blue Citroen now. Another penalty there for RTR Tyke. Not going to be good news for him. He's going to be giving up that spot to the Citroen and the fellow Lamborghini of RTR Lucas 22. He's now going to be under attack from yet again another Citroen, Vornax in P6 now. RTR Tyke definitely not happy about that. But we always appreciate sportsmanlike racing here at the RTR racing community. So thank you once again for all the racers for always listening to the rules here in this GR4 championship. RTR Tyke still holding on to P5, making sure he stays within the draft of that fellow Lamborghini driver. Vornax trying to make a move in there, looking on the inside, not close enough to make a move though on that first Lamborghini. Losing the line a little bit and gaining control over that Citroen just before they get into turns number 6 and 7 once again. RTR ID78 now getting a chance to run away from the 3 drivers behind him. Getting some good separation between them as Pearland 117 goes into that turn number 9 just a little bit too early, bumping his fellow Ferrari driver just slightly. All 6 drivers getting a pretty good exit out of turn number 10. Top 3 drivers getting a beautiful draft off of each other. RTR ID78 trying to make another move onto turn number 1, biting the curb a little bit too much and losing that draft, that gain that he had over the 3 drivers ahead of him. He's now going to be the middleman and possibly offering a bit of the draft for those 3 racers behind him, bringing them back up for some more action in between the top 6 this time. Great effort there from ID78 trying to make a move on P2. Pearland 117 might have been a little bit too ambitious, maybe a little bit too early. He might have wanted to have a little bit more, a little less space in between each other, better yet. As Vornax is also trying to go tightly on the inside, losing a little bit. You can see some scratches at the front of that Citroen now as he tried to go on the inside in turn number 4 on Lucas 22 and Tyke. Those 2 Lamborghinis didn't exactly pan out for him the way that he wanted to, losing time and possibly damaging his vehicle just a little bit. I wonder. According to the heads-up display, no damage there for Vornax, so good for him, but not exactly a good attempt for an overtake. losing time and going into the pits now, as most of the leaders, all of the leaders, are going into the pits. I wonder if everyone is going to be going into the pits except for RTR Loves Hell is now going to be in P1 and coming from P9 to P1 now. Who's going to be coming out of the pits now? RTR Adrian Senna is now going to be in P2. Although we wonder for how long he's going to be in P2, as he does have fresh tires, not to mention that RTR Loves Hell still has to go into the pits himself. All the other drivers behind him, that would be ID 78 gaining a position, coming out in P2 just ahead of RTR Parallel 117, who's now just going over turns number 3, getting chased down already by RTR Tyke in that Lamborghini, also on fresh tires. Vornax in P6 going into the pits as well. Mad Max, I believe, has also gone to the pits. He is exiting, followed by RTR Lucas 22 is also on an outlap. He also just got brand new tires, possibly a bit of gas, not exactly sure. RTR Sanda has not gone into the pits. He's still in P9, followed by Marco Bodi in P10 and Dopey NOB in the back of the pack in the McLaren. He's on an outlap. He has already gone into the pits. I believe the last three racers that were waiting to go into the pits would be RTR Sanda, Marco Bodi, as well as RTR Loves Hell, who's going into the pits as we speak, as we turn the camera over to him. That's going to be relinquishing the P1 position back to RTR Adrian Senna. Let's go back down the line, see if RTR Sanda decides to go into the pits. Marco Bodi is actually already gone into the pits as well. As you can see, the outlap banner already over him. RTR Sanda going very late into the pits. And back, and after all that shuffling, RTR Adrian Senna is still going to be in P1 in first place, 2.5 seconds away from the Citroen of RTR ID 78, who gained a position in that pit stop battle. 3.2 seconds ahead of Parallel 117, fellow Ferrari partner of RTR Adrian Senna. RTR Tyke challenging that Ferrari Parallel 117 around turn number 4, closely behind him in P4. Vornax second of the Citroens in P5, followed by Mad Max, who had that great qualifying session, starting off in P3, now halfway down the lineup from that position in P6 at the moment. RTR Loves Hell down in P6 from P1 after going into the pits pretty late. RTR Lucas 22 smelling opportunity for P7, as he is just behind that Ferrari as well. We're going to stay behind him for just a moment, see if there's any sort of action, any sort of attack, any sort of move as they go down into turn 9 and turn 10. About to begin lap number 17, but it seems that RTR Lucas is just a little bit too far away from him to make any sort of move just yet. Let's see if he can get a good draft going down his finish line straight, see if he can make up for that time as he goes into turns number 1. About half a second in between these drivers now. Not exactly the draft that RTR Lucas 22 was looking for. Marco Bodi going down the line, getting a best lap time, personal best lap time for him, a 128.80. Congratulations to Marco Bodi. Still doing pretty good for a rookie for his first race in P9. 2 positions ahead of both of the McLarens, Dopey NOB and RTR Sanda, making up the back of the leaderboard right now as they fly past the finish line straight to begin their lap 17. RTR Adrian Senna 50 seconds into his lap 17. RTR ID 78 not managing to close that gap from Parallel 117, who's now just about a second away from him. Creating a bigger gap ahead of him though, RTR Adrian Senna is about 6.5 seconds from that Citroen. It's going to be even farther away from Parallel 117. So even if Parallel 117 does manage to catch ID 78, which I believe he will, as there is just over an hour left into this race, he has tons of time to do that, pretty fresh tires. Once he does manage, if he does manage to get an overtake over ID 78, he's going to have a bit of a gap to catch up to RTR Adrian Senna. Although they do have the same vehicle, that time gap is going to be some time to make up for. So we may not see a challenge for RTR Adrian Senna for a while, maybe not until the next pit stop, as RTR ID 78 desperately trying to create that gap between that Ferrari, not managing to keep it just enough though. Less than a second in between both racers now as they start the climb up to turn number 3. RTR ID78 putting down fastest sector so far as he's trying to run away from that Ferrari in P3. P3 is a podium position, but I'm pretty sure ID78 would like to stay a little bit higher on that podium at the end of the day. And he does manage to create that gap that he was looking for, now about a second and 3/10 between himself and that P3 position. RTR Tyke getting challenged by the second Citroen Vornax, who's just out of overtake range in turns number 6 and 7, chasing him down into turn number 8. Parallel 117 just ahead of him, getting a penalty, following the rules, turning to the right and burning off that penalty before turn number 9, losing more positioning there, unfortunately for him. RTR Tyke now in a P3, getting chased there by Vornax still in P4, taking advantage of that penalty that was given to Parallel 117. Parallel 117 quickly disposing according to the rules of that penalty, burning it off accordingly as he should before he entered turn number 9, and already chasing down the 2 drivers ahead of him and already getting an overtake on both drivers. Not exactly that much of a challenge for that Ferrari, as you can see. Lost those positions pretty much for just that finish line straight and gained it back quickly, but that gave an opportunity for RTR Agent Senna to create a 5.5 second gap from RTR ID 78, and a 3 second gap now is between himself and that second Ferrari of Parallel 117. RTR Tyke still closely behind him though in that Lamborghini as they go around turn number 4, trying to peek on the inside. RTR Tyke seems a little indecisive there, not sure if he wanted to take a peek or take the draft of Parallel 117 as they go down the curves of turn number 6 and 7. Vornax still in the background of that camera, just out of draft of that Lamborghini as he starts chasing those 2 Italian cars down into turn number 9. RTR Mad Max, the last of the Citroens in P6, and Parallel 117 getting challenged there by Lucas22, who went very wide. Maybe touched the bumper and lost a little bit of control after he may have touched that Ferrari. But he does have it under control. Once again getting a pretty slow lap there, but still holding on to P8 as he goes down the finish line straight. Parallel 117 already going to work on that gap between ID 78, 2.7 seconds separating himself and ID 78 now. Although Parallel 117 still has to do a bit of multitasking there as he's trying to close that gap between RTR ID 78 and trying to keep RTR Tyke behind him, making that slim Ferrari as wide as possible. Making that vehicle might be a little bit wide, might be a little bit easier for cars like the Citroen, who do seem to have a bit of a wide back bumper. But Parallel 117 in that slim Ferrari, same thing can be said for that Lamborghini. So I guess it might be a bit of a good pairing in terms of overtaking challenges, as they are just about the same width. Cars like the Citroen of ID 78 or Vornax may pose a bit of a different challenge though, just due to the mere size and the shape of the vehicles. RTR ID 78 now 6 seconds away from the P1 position of RTR Adrian Senna, who is already flying past turn number 2, making the climb up already past turn number 3, getting that apex just as much as he needs to, and down the straight in between turns 3 and 4 he goes. still managing to keep that gap. RTR ID 78. Still 2 seconds ahead of Parallel 117 and P3. You can now see him in the background of his camera view. RTR Tyke dropping back a little bit from Parallel 117, falling into the grasps of that second Citroen of Vornax now. Chasing him down into the finish line straight. RTR Mad Max possibly becoming relevant in the next few laps as well. You can see him starting to catch up to his fellow Citroen driver. Just under an hour left in this race. Gone through about 32 minutes, 22 laps here at the Red Bull Ring. GR4 grand finale of the championship, race number 5. We're hoping to have a season that's going to be around twice as long, but we will soon be coming back to you in 2 weeks with a bit of a surprise, with a brand new league, a brand new twist, and hopefully more exciting racing for you. RTR ID 78 probably getting a little nervous now, as there's about a second and a half between him and Parallel 117. Around turns number 6 and 7 they go. He's going to be definitely watching his rear view mirrors as he gets the apex of turn number 8. Beautifully, just a slight turn there. Bit of a short straight there just before turn number 9. And a downhill turn. And another downhill turn there for turn number 10. Bit of a roller coaster design here for the Red Bull Ring. ID 78 still managing to keep about a second and a tenth in between himself and that second Ferrari, Parallel 117. Parallel 117 not exactly letting up though, as he starts to close that gap, chasing him down the straight just before turn number 4. Parallel 117 smelling opportunity coming up for him soon, recovering from that penalty pretty quickly actually, and coming back very aggressively at those 2 places that he lost from RTR Tyke and Vornax, dispatching them very quickly on that finish line straight just after he burned off his penalty. RTR ID 78, if you notice, started drifting around those turns. So once again, tire wear is going to start to be a bit of a factor for these drivers with the settings that we do have set up for tire wear in this league. ID 78 and Parallel 117 beginning the climb from turn 1 up to turn 3. You can see the Ferrari in first position of RTR Adrian Senna just up the hill there. ID 78 seems for him that uphill seems to come just in time for him every time that he needs it. Managing to keep that car as wide as possible, like we said, and always seems to get a bit of a good takeoff as opposed to the Ferrari as they go up the hill on that specific part of the track. Although downhill sometimes is a bit of a different story, especially around turn 6 and 7 where we saw ID 78 starting to drift around a little bit. Might be losing some tire grip going down the hill on these turns, so that's something that he's going to have to start nursing while he's still defending from RTR Parallel 117. Although the attacker usually does tend to lose a little bit more tire grip, as RTR ID 78 gives up P2 and decides to pit early. We'll be looking for an undercut there on Parallel 117 and RTR Adrian Senna. As RTR Adrian Senna goes into the pits as well, followed by RTR Mad Max. A couple of these drivers looking for undercuts. trying to stay in the positions that they were in earlier, knowing that drivers like Vornax, Tyke, and Perlin 117 are still going to have to go into the pits. So those are going to be position gains if they come out at the right spot at the right time, of course. And most of these drivers are pretty good at gauging that, especially the drivers that are at the top of the league here. Not to mention the Citroens as well. The Citroen team is very good at figuring out their pit strategies and doing the best they can to start catching up in terms of position through the pit stops. Perlin 117 still in first place, 4 seconds away from Vornax, who also has not yet pitted. RTR Tyke, same thing can be said for him, as well as Lucas 22 in P5, who's already getting chased and overtaken by RTR Adrian Senna on brand new tires. Let's see if Perlin 117 decides to go into the pits here now. Probably will be the best decision for him. And he decides to stick out there for just one more lap, maybe more. Wonder what his pit strategy is going to be for this race. It is the second pit of the race and just over 52 minutes left to go. So definitely looking forward to see what strategy he has in mind. Vornax behind him, who was behind him earlier, has decided not to do the same thing as him. He's already gone into the pits. And out he goes, I believe. Bit of a shuffle in positions. Yet again, RTR Tyke still yet to have pitted. He's in P2 right now. RTR Adrian Senna already going back up there to P3. Lucas 22 still also has not yet pitted. Taking advantage of the draft of the GR4 Championship leader, RTR Adrian Senna. RTR ID 78. I believe has also gone into the pits, as Perlin 117, the leader, is now going into the pits. It was just a few seconds away from RTR Tyke, also following him into the pits, giving an opportunity for RTR Adrian Senna to regain that P1 position, getting chased down by RTR Lucas 22, who I believe still has to go into the pits, trying to go for a little bit longer on the stint. Maybe going for some kind of overcut action, on who I wonder we will find out later on. Lucas 22 still staying quite closely behind the leader, the Ferrari of RTR Adrian Senna, RTR ID 78, coming back up there to P3, possibly looking at P2 or P3, also depending if he manages to stay ahead of Perlin 117. Both drivers are obviously waiting on RTR Lucas 22 to go into the pits. Let's see if he does so on this lap, on lap 27, as he goes around turn number 3 where the pit entry is. And yes, he does. He's going to be going into the pits for some tires and some fuel, giving up that P2 position to RTR ID 78, who was already under attack. Half a second in between himself and P3 of Perlin 117 as they both begin to climb again, both getting a little bit out of shape, trying to get as tight of a line as possible up to climb into turns number 2 and 3. RTR Lucas 22 and Vornax going into the pits, as you can see, losing some positioning. RTR Mad Max now back up to P4, RTR Tyke down to P5, Loves Hell, the last of the Ferraris, coming back up there to P6 now. Vornax appears to have managed to come back out of the pits in P7, followed by the last Lamborghini, Lucas 22. Marco Bodi coming out in P9. RTR Sanda and Dopiano B still in the back of the pack in P10 and P11 respectively. RTR ID78 doing a fantastic job of defending from Pearland 117 and this grand finale of the GR4 Championship, doing everything he can to gain a few more points. Although how it's looking right now, it seems that RTR Adrian Senna already has the lead in the championship. If he wins this race, I do not believe any driver will be able to catch up to him in terms of points, as the P1 position does get awarded 30 points plus 1, which RTR Adrian Senna would have at the moment, with the fastest lap time of 126.58. Closest contender would be right now in P3, Mr. RTR Pearland 117, even if he did get the fastest lap time. And P1 to finish the race, that would be 31 points plus 105, giving him 136 points. Not quite enough, even if RTR Agent Senna would get something like P2 or maybe even P3. So, as it stands right now, RTR Agent Senna is looking pretty good for him in terms of time gap and how much time is left in the race. There's still going to be probably around 2, maybe 3 pit stops left in this race. So, we will see how much longer they decide to go on this stint. We have been seeing quite a few racing soft tires, maybe later on for some strange or tricky stints, might be seeing some race mediums or maybe even some race hards. Although I believe race hards are not part of this league specifically. RTR ID78 still managing to keep that gap, just about a second in between himself and Pearland 117, doing a fantastic job of defending today. Pearland 117 completely focused on RTR ID78 ahead of him, as he's around 6.5 seconds ahead of the closest contender behind him, the black and yellow livery. The second Citroen on the leaderboard, RTR Mad Max. RTR tight just behind him, going around turns number 6 and 7. RTR Loves Hell last of the Ferraris in P6, still Vornax last of the Citroens in P7. Putting down a personal best sector as we had a camera view on him for just a moment. Back to Pearland 117, who's still trying his best to chase down RTR ID78 as they go around the finish line straight to begin lap number 31 of this race. Just over 45 minutes remaining left to go. Pearland 117 probably starting to be a little worried with just under 45 minutes left in this race, knowing that if he cannot create if he cannot start cutting down this gap between himself and ID 78, he may be a little bit in trouble, depending on what ID 78 decides to do in terms of trickery for the next pit stop. Maybe something to look at as Parallel 117 puts out a personal best as he continues to chase down RTR ID 78 around lap 32. Up the hill once more. RTR Adrian Senna comfortably ahead of RTR ID 78, about 3 seconds separating those two drivers. He is quite literally ahead of the curve. On lap 32, as we start going down the list here of drivers, seems to be pretty good spacing between most of them. Mad Max has RTR Tyke just about 3 seconds away from him. 2.2 seconds away from him is going to be the Lasser Ferrari and the Citroen of RTR Loves Hell and Vornax. RTR Lucas 22 closely behind, trying to catch up to those drivers as well. So maybe seeing some challenges in the midfield soon to come, as we're watching a challenge right now with Vornax going on the outside of turn number 8 to get an overtake on RTR Loves Hell. Back up to P6 he goes. RTR Loves Hell seems to be losing a little bit of pace there, not exactly challenging that overtake too much. Based off of their tunes, it may seem that they're quite the opposite of the racers ahead of them. Seems that Loves Hell has much easier time climbing up the hill compared to that Citroen of Vornax just ahead of him. RTR Lucas 22 about 3 seconds away from the action ahead of him. Marco Bodi a full 30 seconds ahead of the McLaren in P10, was about 4 seconds ahead of his partner in the back of the pack in P11, RTR Sanda. ID 78 now about 2 seconds ahead of Parallel 117 and 2 seconds away from RTR Adrian Senna, who seems to be closing that gap between himself and that second driver. Maybe seeing some podium switches, some podium challenges in the next laps to see, hopefully, is what we want to see. RTR Mad Max about 10 seconds away from all that action, and sure enough, I do believe he was losing a little bit of pace there. RTR Loves Hell going into the pits there yet again. Wondering if he's having some sort of issues with fuel or the tires that he decided to go with, as RTR Mad Max puts down a personal best sector as he starts curving around turn number 3. Closing that gap down again, Parallel 117. Just over a second between himself and that P2 podium position. RTR Adrian Senna getting a chance to fly away from ID 78 again. That gap opened up again to about 3.5 seconds now. RTR Mad Max catching up to the top 3 leaders ever so slightly on every single lap. Putting down personal best sectors, pretty good pace for this Citroen driver. And Parallel 117 now dangerously close behind ID 78. Just a few tenths separating them now. Both getting a good exit off of turn number 1, starting to climb into turn number 2. Maryland 117 staying in within draft range of ID 78, peeking into the inside, trying to get a bit of a reaction from ID 78. He gets none of it as they go around turn number 3. Maryland 117 going very, very tight on the inside, coming out on the outside of turn number 3. Chasing down ID 78, still a few tenths separating them, still in that draft range. Is he going to peak a little bit once again in turn number 4? He is not. I think he's going to try and close that gap again and go for another attack. Maybe later on down on this lap or in the next straight once he comes around that finish line straight once again. Went for a bit of a move there on turn number 3. Didn't pan out for him, but he's still going to be chasing him down. Both drivers have a pretty good amount of tire wear. Sorry, pretty even amount of tire wear. So we're going to see exactly who comes out on top of this. Very different tire wear from defending and from attacking. Maryland 117 has a few tricks up his sleeve. RTR ID 78 may have the advantage of having that car a little bit wider than that Ferrari behind him. Maryland 117 going a little bit wide, although ID 78 decides to go for another undercut going into the pits once again. Let's see if that works out for him in the few laps to come. Very exciting lap there between racers Maryland 117 and ID 78. Mad Max following his Citroen partner there, going into the pits as well, getting some brand new tires, getting overtaken by drivers like Vornax, RTR, Tyke, Lucas 22 possibly, although these drivers are already exiting the pits. ID 78 still managing to stay ahead of RTR Lucas 22, who is now beginning to climb around turn number 1, heading into turn number 2, where ID 78 already is ahead of him. RTR Mad Max coming out in P7. RTR Loves Hell, who went in for a very early pit stop, pretty short stint with those last tires. Wondering if he was having a bit of an issue with the selection that he went with. He's still in P8 now, 7 seconds away from Mad Max, who just went into the pits as well. Marco Boldi 13 seconds away from P8, but a full 40 seconds ahead of P10 and P11, the McLarens in the back of the pack. RTR, Adrian Senna, as well as drivers like Maryland 117 might have to look into a pit stop coming up pretty shortly, now that drivers like RTR ID 78 started to trigger a bit of that early pit stop craze. That may create some opportunities or take away some opportunities for the leaders. Let's quickly go up and down the list once again there, folks. With that reshuffling of some of these pit stops, probably going to be looking at a few more pit stops soon to come, maybe even on this lap. Some of the drivers approaching turn number 9. Let's see if any of them decide to make the extra sharp turn into the pits. None of them so far as they go around turn number 10. Dopey NLB getting blue flag, making sure he lets the drivers behind him get past him. Very good sportsmanship from Dopey NLB in that McLaren. Vornax now in P4, top of the Citroens right now. Although only 2.5 seconds away from him is going to be RTR ID 78. Who has already gone into the pits, definitely has fresher tires. RTR Lucas 22 and P6 behind that Citroen. Mad Max Lasso's Drones right now in P7. Loves Hell still in P8. Marco Bodi in P9, and the McLarens switching up positions, I believe now. RTR Sand in P10, Dopey NOB in P11. Next in the round of pit stops, RTR Tyke giving up P3, dropping down the order as he gets brand new tires and some fuel. Vornax now in P3, beginning the climb on lap number 39. RTR ID 78 still about 2.5 seconds away from him. Maybe pretty comfortable with the gap, knowing that he has fresher tires and doesn't exactly want to use them on that fellow Citroen driver, knowing that Vornax still has to go into the pits. Lucas 22 getting past Dopey NOB in the McLaren. Mad Max from P7 to P6 now after the pit stop of RTR Tyke. Speaking of pit stops, Marco Bodi, our rookie, number 64 amateur, going into the pits as well. Comfortably a full 30-40 seconds ahead of the McLarens. And RTR Adrian Senna going into the pits, the leader going into the pits now. RTR Pearland 117 staying out for one more lap, maybe even more. Maybe going for a similar stint as he has been doing before. Vornax also joining RTR Adrian Senna into the pits, followed by RTR Lucas 22 in the Lamborghini. And out they go. Let's see how they are now in terms of order. Pearland 117 a full 14 seconds ahead of RTR Adrian Senna. Adrian Senna may now be under attack from RTR ID 78. Although RTR ID 78 does seem to obviously has some fresher tires, so ID 78 may not want to go for the attack just yet, quite possibly later on. Quick comment there from Danny. Hello there, and nice comment again, like always. Thank you very much, Danny. Hello there to Danny from yours truly from Bumblebee. Always appreciate the comments from the viewers alike. Happy to have you guys here. Hope you guys have been enjoying the race so far. Just over 30 minutes left to go. RTR Adrian Senna still in P2, although right now might be looking like P1 as RTR Pearland 117 goes into the pits for his stop. A change of tires and probably some fuel as well. RTR Adrian Senna going past the finish line straight to begin lap number 40. Coming out in P1, Pearland 117 just leaving his pit box. So RTR ID 78 now in P2, followed by Pearland 117 in P3. And 6 seconds away from him now is going to be RTR Mad Max, desperately trying to get back to his rightful position that he began in during the qualifying session. Started off in a cool P3, unfortunately dropped down the order all the way down to around P9, P7 if I remember correctly. Although through his tricks of the trade, especially through pitting, he has slowly been moving up the order, so very impressive to see him come back up. Vornax in P5 there. Dopey NOB desperately getting out of the way there for Vornax. May have hit the wall there if I'm correct. RTR Tyke. Down he goes around turns number 6 and 7. RTR Loves Hell closely behind him, just about 3 seconds between those drivers. Less than a second and a half between himself and the Lamborghini behind him is going to be RTR Lucas 22, chasing down the Ferrari of RTR Loves Hell into turn number 9. May have some sort of overtake happening soon for these drivers. RTR Loves Hell may be in trouble as he does have a bit of older tires than the driver behind him, the Lamborghini of RTR Lucas 22. Still managing to keep that gap pretty consistently, about a second in between himself and that P7 position as they start chasing each other up the hill. RTR Lucas 22 has nothing to worry about behind him. He's going to be a full 40 seconds ahead of Marco Bodi. Was a full 30 seconds ahead of those McLarens of RTR Sand and Dopey NOB. Lucas 22 not managing to gain any more than a second gap. Going a little wide exiting turn number 4. That may cost him in the chase for P7 here. RTR Tyke still managing to stay away from RTR Loves Hell. Vornax in P5, RTR Mad Max now in P4. They're 7 seconds away from that P3 podium position. Perlin 117, 2 seconds away from an improvement on his podium position from P3 to P2. RTR ID 78 closing in on RTR Adrian Senna, about a second and a half separating those drivers now, and RTR Loves Hell goes into the pits again. Seems to be having a lot of trouble, not getting too much of a life, not too much of a stint as he wants to, I believe, out of those racing soft tires. Well, that gives a chance for RTR Lucas 22 to get up to P7 uncontested. RTR Tyke in P6 as well. Back to RTR Adrian Senna, top of the leaders right now, with just about a second in between himself and ID 78 behind him. "25 minutes left in this race, 44 laps in. RTR Adrian Senna seems to be making up some ground for himself. Still holding on to that fastest lap point, and now 2.5 seconds ahead of the Citroen of RTR ID 78. RTR ID 78 still under attack, or under close contention from an attack from Perlin 117, who's still about a second and a half behind him. As they start lap number 45. Pearland 117 not exactly worried yet again about any challenges behind him. He's looking pretty clear for the next 7 seconds behind him as he puts down personal fastest sector for himself. Pearland 117 now starting to use his flashing lights technique, trying to see if he can get any sort of a reaction from RTR ID 78, knowing that the timer is closing in to a finish. Just about 23 minutes left in this race. Pearland 117 closing in on ID 78 slowly but surely. Probably the only racer close behind one of their fellow racers aside from the McLarens, who may be battling it out soon. About less than a second between the chrome, green and silver of RTR Sanda. Dopian will be just behind him. Dopian will be going a little bit wide as we turn the camera away from him. Beginning the climb once again on lap number 45. ID 78 falling in closer into the traps of Pearland 117. Pearland 117 now closely behind him in draft range. Going around that slight bend of turn number 2, uphill into turn number 3. Pearland 117 decides not to go for the same move he tried last time, staying behind ID 78 in this case, and keeping that short gap in between each other. Chasing him down into turn number 4. Now he might be looking for a little bit of a gap there. Taking a bit of a peek. Great anti-roll tuning there for Pearland 117. You can see how smoothly that Ferrari went around the curve of turn number 4. That was very nice to see. Pearland 117 still keeping about a half-second gap in between ID 78, still in close attack range, keeping on to that draft of the Citroen ahead of him as they entered turn number 9, beginning that downhill, making sure they get their braking points done correctly as Pearland 117 bumped them a little bit, as you can see there. RTR ID 78. That's what I mean, that you have to get your braking points correct, especially when you're going downhill. You want to make sure you don't get a lockup as they're going pretty much side by side into turn number 1. Pearland 117 gets the inside, bites the gap just enough, bites the curb just enough on that apex, and he is literally just ahead of ID 78. ID 78 smelling the exhaust of that Ferrari around turn number 2, climbing up to turn number 3. 78 deciding to stay on the outside of Pearland 117. Getting a bit of a faster entry on turn number 3, staying on the outside, I believe. Now peeking towards the inside of turn number 4. Doesn't even want to be in P3 for very long. Knows that if he loses that draft to a Ferrari, that Ferrari can be long gone, especially in the last few minutes of this race. RTR ID 78 might be suffering now, though. Keep in mind that ID 78 went to the pits a lot earlier than these two Ferraris ahead of him. May have been a benefit for him a few laps before. Not sure if you can say the same thing for him now. And ID 78 knows it as he goes into the pits. On lap number 47, hopefully going for maybe one more undercut, one more chance to get a little bit higher on the podium. Right now on P3, 11 seconds away from Vornax. Vornax passing that finish line now, though. And Vornax for a while might be the guy in P3. 20 minutes left in this race. We might see another round of pit stops from some of these racers farther down the order, or trying to make up some positions in the last few minutes of this race. ID 78 getting out of the battle from Pearland 117, dropping down to P5. Not a loss of that many positions, down from P2 to P5, 3 positions lost in that pit stop. and still about 20 minutes left in this race. Maryland 117. Now the only driver with a chance to get an overtake here on RTR, Adrian Senna. Let's see what he decides to do in terms of pit stops. That may give an opportunity for RTR Maryland 117 to surpass RTR Adrian Senna. Flashing his lights into the turns as he knows he is just behind him now. Although drivers like RTR Adrian Senna are not exactly drivers that are easily distracted. RTR loves hell going into the pits as well. Maryland 117 now 8/10 behind the leader on the track and in the championships, RTR Adrian Senna. Wonder if he's going to try and go for some move as he's flashing his lights to his fellow Ferrari driver. Peeking on the inside of turn number 10 there. Maryland 117 now just behind the wing of RTR Adrian Senna, decides to take the outside into turn number 1. Maryland 117 now smelling an opportunity here, flashing his lights away up turn number 2. Going on the outside once again before they go into turn number 3. Adrian Senna decides to take the inside. Both getting a pretty good exit, getting away. Maryland 117, however, not letting RTR Adrian Senna get away from him too much, as he might be looking for a peek on the inside in turn number 4. RTR Adrian Senna knows it. Goes for the inside line a little earlier than usual before he took that turn there. Some good late braking from both drivers on the last few turns as they go around turns number 6 and 7. RTR Adrian Senna getting chased down there. And RTR Adrian Senna deciding he has enough, goes into the pits just before RTR Maryland 117. Maryland 117 is now going to be at the top of the leaderboard right now in P1. And lap 51, Vornak's also going into the pits behind RTR Adrian Senna in the Ferrari. RTR Tyke in the Lamborghini decided to take a pit stop as well, bumping ID 78 back up to P3 in a podium position. RTR Lucas 22 also taking the opportunity to go into the pits. And Maryland 117 doing a very late entry into the pits as well on this particular lap for him. And RTR Adrian Senna comes around to possibly pick up P1 again. As Parallel 117 gets released as RTR ID 78 is just going down the finish line straight. And Parallel 117 somehow gets a penalty exiting the pits. I would have loved to have had his camera view at that moment. I wonder exactly what happened there. But that's going to be even more good news for RTR ID 78, who's now about 6.5 seconds away from P2 where he was earlier. Although keep in mind now once again that because he did go into the pits earlier, he had to do it again. And he's already a few laps in on these tires as compared to those two Ferraris ahead of him. RTR Mad Max, RTR Tyke, and Vornax closely behind each other as they start going down around turn number 4, heading down to turns 5 and 6. A lot of these drivers have not yet pitted though. However, RTR Tyke has, as well as Vornax, I believe. So Mad Max is going to be the driver right now that's a little bit under attack, although he does have pretty fresh tires to begin with as well. Not exactly sure if he's gone into the pits yet or not. Lucas 22 also seems like he has gone into the pits. Same thing can be said for RTR Loves Hell. Marco Bodi, same thing, and the McLaren now of RTR Sanda, as Dopiano B unfortunately left us earlier on during the race. Seems to also has taken his chance and gone into the pits. 53 laps in, back to RTR Adrian Senna. 3 seconds away from his second place contender, this fellow Ferrari driver, Parallel 117. Still about 6 seconds away from him is going to be RTR ID 78, who's not exactly worried about any competition behind him at the moment, with RTR Mad Max 10 seconds away from him. Back to Tyke and Vornax, where we may be seeing a bit of an overtake opportunity happening here for both drivers. Just a few tenths separating that Lamborghini and that Citroen in P5 and P6 as they go downhill into the finish line straight, just passing turn number 10. Vornax getting a little bit of oversteer there on the exit, getting a little bit out of shape. Still managing to keep it between a few tenths as they begin that climb yet again. Lap number 54 for them, I believe. And RTR Tyke going for an inside late overtake on RTR Mad Max, forcing him wide on the exit, feeding him into his fellow Citroen driver of Vornax. Vornax still looking at RTR Tyke as his main target and tries to go on the inside on turn number 4. Doesn't get it though. Loses a little bit of time. Falls back into the grasp of his fellow driver once again, RTR Mad Max. Mad Max not managing to get an overtake on turns number 6 or 7 though. May just be biding his time as RTR Adrian Senna goes in for a very short stint, a very early pit stop. With just 9 minutes left in this race, he may be looking for an undercut of all undercuts, just to try and have very fresh tires on this exit. Or he may have just gone in for a splash of fuel. Not exactly sure what he did on that entry. We will soon see it though, but that put him back down to P3 with 9 minutes left in this race. RTR ID 78, who now has just about similar tire life, is in P2 just ahead of him. And that's a 6-second gap away from RTR ID 78 and Pearland 117 now. ID 78 is going to be doing all he can to keep RTR Adrian Senna just behind him. This is where both drivers would like RTR Adrian Senna right now. In P3, he may not get enough points to finish as champion of the race. That might actually end up going to Pearland 117 as the points stand. RTR ID 78 may even have a chance to get back up to P2 or P3 higher in the championship leaderboard. RTR ID 78 managing to keep RTR Adrian Senna just behind him. Less than half a second in between both of those racers as they start to go up to turn number 3. RTR Adrian Senna looking for a late peak, doesn't get anything out of it though. On lap 56, just over 7 minutes left remaining in this race. RTR Tyke also still getting chased down by the other Citroens of Vornax and Mad Max. RTR Adrian Senna flashing his lights, trying to get a reaction out of RTR ID 78's. ID 78 knows that if he can't keep him behind him, he can at least slow him down in terms of points. And whatever happens behind him, Pearland 117 is probably happy with whatever outcome it is. So long as RTR Adrian Senna does not catch him in the last few minutes of this race. Although anything is possible, and RTR Adrian Senna is trying to make it possible as he gets an overtake on RTR ID 78. Pearland 117, however, goes into the pits as well. Seems that both Ferrari drivers might have a bit of a trouble managing the refueling. That may be why we're seeing both Ferraris go into the pits. Although they have served their time and hopefully they can make up for lost time with just over 6 minutes remaining. RTR Adrian Senna certainly did. He's back up to P1. About a second away already from ID 78, 2 seconds behind him. As usual, is going to be RTR Pearland 117. Seems that ID 78 has been defending from Pearland 117 this whole race, and pretty good at it, I might say. Pearland 117, outlap marker over his head as he just exited the pits on this particular lap. Vornax still trying to get some headway on RTR Tyke. Mad Max falling back a little bit there. He's still 11 seconds away from any threat though. His closest threat's that Lamborghini in P7 of Lucas 22. Vornax trying to make a move, looking on the outside there. And Vornax does get it, all because RTR Tyke decided to go into the pits now though. Some of these drivers having a little trouble gauging the fuel closer to the end of this race. That's why we're seeing a few random racers going into the pits. Certainly makes up for quite an exciting last few minutes. 4 minutes and 45 seconds left on this clock. RTR Adrian Senna can force an extra lap depending on where he finishes. 57 laps completed in this race. On lap 58, just about a second and a half ahead of Perlin 117 now, who got the overtake over RTR ID 78. Both Ferraris are now going for a 1-2. And right now it seems that maybe the only points change in terms of leaderboard, maybe ID 78 gaining a P3 podium position over RTR Tyke, possibly, depending on how the points calculate out. Because as it stands, Tyke has 89 points in P3. RTR ID 78 is just behind, is in P7 with 52 actually, so who knows, maybe a bit of a stretch. Because as it stands so far, those 52 points, you can add 22 to that, that'd be 72 there. That would not give enough for for ID 78 to get past RTR Tyke. Although Tyke right now is in P6, that would only earn him a 15 points, but that would still keep him just ahead. So RTR Tyke still may be going home with P3 out of this championship. Although ID 78, as well as the rest of the Citroens, have certainly been impressing today on this grand finale of the GR4 championship. First off, with this driver here, with RTR Mad Max showing off his best skills in a qualifying session here at the Red Bull Ring. Vornax with some great overtakes, some great attacks at the beginning of the race, and great pace overall. Not to mention, of course, top of the Citroens at the moment, RTR ID 78. Great pit stops, a great pace, managing to hold on to P3 of the podium so far. Race isn't done yet though, but as it looks so far, it looks like it's going to be a 1-2-3 for Adrian Senna, Perlin, and ID 78 with just 2 minutes left in this race session. Depending on whether or not, of course, RTR and Senna decides to push this race just over the timer. Depending on where he is, when the timer goes out and when he passes the finish line. Down into turns number 4, 5, 6 they go. Beginning that descent all the way down to turn number 10, where they start flying down the straight, which is also the lowest point of the Red Bull Ring. Perlin 117 desperately trying to get some sort of reaction from the driver ahead of him, flashing his lights every chance that he gets. Half a second in between these racers now. 45 seconds left on the timer. This may be the final lap of the race, depending on where RTR Adrian decides to finish. And he knows it, as he is putting on the maximum pace that he can. With Perlin 117 just behind him, still with a chance to get an overtake, as RTR Adrian Senna goes very wide into turn number 3. Losing the P1 position. He's coming out of turn number 3 just behind Perlin 117. That's going to give a chance for RTR ID 78 to close the gap ever so slight. He's going to be 2.8 seconds away from the action ahead of him now. RTR ID 78 and Perlin having a little bit of trouble on the entry and exit of turn number 4. Both chasing each other down, chasing those points desperately just before the race is done, as this is the final lap, ladies and gentlemen. RTR ID 78 in the background of that camera. Don't think he'll have a chance to catch up unless these drivers make a mistake in these last couple of turns. RTR Adrian Senna is still trying to make up for that mistake he did on turn number 3. Perlin 117 getting a great entry and exit around turn number 9. Down to go into turn number 10, flashing his lights as RTR Adrian Senna as he's slipping away there. And he gets a penalty last second, which he does have to burn down, but he still finishes in second place. Still comes out as champion of the GR4 Championship League. Pearlin 117 is going to be going home with second place of the GR4 champion. And this man here, RTR Tyke, I think also may have a chance of taking home P3 in the championship. That is unconfirmed though, however. We still do have to do the calculating for real and see who comes out on top. Vornax actually came out in P4, and he's in P4 with 65 points. That gave him 19, so that may have actually given him P3 of the GR4 championship. Can't say for sure for RTR Tyke, but I think it is a definite congratulations for RTR Adrian Senna, who also takes home the fastest lap of the race with a 126.58.